There is a lot of discussion in the comments section of my previous viral video. In today's video, I'm going to be responding to some of them generally because we need to talk about it.
Yeah, we do.
So today we're going to discuss, is Buddhism a religion, the history of Buddhism, as well as finally, do Buddhists believe in gods or creators? Let's start from the beginning. Buddhism came out of what is modern-day India in 500 BC. There are 2 or 3 main branches of Buddhism: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Theravada is the oldest form of Buddhism
Oldest surviving form. There's a difference.
and is mainly practiced in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Southeast Asia, basically. As you can see, Buddhism started over here and started to spread into these countries and was one of the first places that it really spread. Around 3rd century BC and so on. Mahayana Buddhism, though, moved into Tibet, China, and Japan much later.
Except we now know that this stuff didn't emerge much later, and it might even have emerged in the early Buddhist texts contemporaneously with the stuff that the Theravadins take for granted. So we talk about the Gandharan texts, they're not the only ones, the Khotanese texts, Bactrian texts, all these sorts of early Buddhist texts, because Pali isn't the only early Buddhist text. All these other early Buddhist texts have hints of Mahayana doctrine, either straight up Mahayana doctrine or proto-Mahayana doctrine, okay? And what that means is that actually the Mahayana didn't emerge much later, but these ideas were actually there, arising codependently, which is nice, at the same time as the Theravada was still being codified. So this idea that the Mahayana came much later is just flat wrong.
On my page, I specifically talk about Theravada Buddhism. That's the school that I practice. It's the school that I've always resonated with most.
Yes, which is fine, until you start representing one form of Buddhism as all forms of Buddhism. This is called essentialization, and I've done other videos on why this is a bad thing.
Now, there are many subsects of both of these schools. However, Theravada Buddhism, for the most part, is the most non-religious form of Buddhism.
This is a hill that I will die on. This is just not true. The Theravada is not irreligious. It's not the least religious form of Buddhism. It's as religious as the rest of it. There's a strong scriptural focus, acceptance of dogma, which we'll come back to, in that Buddhists have to accept the Buddhist account of the world, the Buddhist account of suffering, the Buddhist account of world creation, the Buddhist account of soteriology. Soteriology is crucial. There's a focus on monasticism. The Theravada, in fact, for most Theravadins, it's very conservative. If you're not a monk, you will not reach enlightenment. The Theravada has tons of ritual, tons of devotional aspects, and meditation. Meditation, believe it or not, has been a religious practice since time immemorial. So I just don't buy this idea that because there's not a creator God, or because there's not Jesus, or because there's not miracles, I mean, arguably there are, but because it doesn't talk in terms of the Abrahamic faiths of the West, that it's not religious or somehow less religious. It's just not true. And it's a myth pushed largely by Westerners. Ask yourself why that might be.
Keep in mind, when I say the word religion, I am mainly speaking from the Abrahamic sense. I am from an Abrahamic religious country, America, and I'm from the Western world. What I mean to say is there is many definitions of the word religion, and scholars have been arguing over this word for a very long time. But some common definitions of religion are: do you believe in a creator? Do you believe in dogmas? Or do you believe in some savior or prophet of some sort? For the most part, Buddhism, specifically Theravada Buddhism, does not fall under any of these definitions.
Yeah, and many of us working in this area come from Christian backgrounds. I live in the UK. It's Church of England, Anglican country. I was raised Catholic. But none of this means that we can't broaden the sense of religion. Again, this is a bias. Choosing to focus in on the word religion in these strange ways is a bias. Ask yourself why that is the case. As for Buddhism not having any dogmas, yes, they do. There's tons. As for Buddhism not bothering about creator gods, they don't believe in a creator god, but they are certainly concerned with them. So I just don't buy this argument, I'm afraid. And no serious scholar of Buddhism buys this argument. If you're presenting yourself as an authority on Buddhism, then you should certainly give scholarly consensus. You should be aware of it. You should be open to the discussion. And what you shouldn't do is be using pop cultural definitions that suit an agenda.
As I said in my previous video, there is no creator, there is no blind faith or dogmas.
There arguably is blind faith in the Buddhist metaphysic, which is what the whole tradition is predicated upon. As for there being no dogmas, yes, there are. I've covered that before. Maybe I'll cover it again a bit later on. But there are definitely dogmas, because dogma, cognate in Sanskrit, is drishti. Cognate in Pali, in the Pali Canon, is ditti. And all this means is a viewpoint, a foundational metaphysical viewpoint maybe, upon which a philosophical or religious tradition is built. Buddhism has plenty of drishtis.
And the Buddha is not a savior in the true sense. Instead, he is a teacher. The Buddha is known to be the enlightened one, the one that basically figured out how to become enlightened and then taught everybody else. To go a bit deeper into this, when he gave his first sermon, that was the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, and Dhamma is basically the teachings of the Buddha. They also translate to laws of nature.
It can mean these things, yes, and in these contexts, it does mean religious law. Dharma is actually one of the great untranslatables, because it has so many definitions in Sanskrit and in Pali. So some of these things, dharma becoming, to become, dharma, thing, object, atom, statute, right, law, more broadly speaking, religious abstraction, justice or virtue, property, there's all sorts of morality, even duty is a big one from the Hindu scriptures imported in. So dharma can mean many things, yes.
And the main point that you must understand is that the Buddha is not here picking you up and taking you towards enlightenment. That is something that you have to do on your own. Buddhism is incredibly independent, and in fact, you are the only one who can make yourself enlightened. This is very different than the savior identity that many people hold towards Jesus Christ, for example. You cannot give yourself to the Buddha for him to make you become enlightened. Instead, look at him like a teacher. If you see a monk in an orange robe, that's typically Theravada Buddhism. If you see paintings like this, that's typically Mahayana Buddhism. The main difference between these two is 1, age. Theravada is an older school. And 2, Theravada is the closest teachings to the original Buddha.
Except that modern research is now continually showing that this probably isn't the case, and there is not a linear progression of Buddhist schools. There was never a linear progression of Buddhist schools, either in age or in doctrinal development. Instead, we have a multifaceted, sort of communal, simultaneous growth in the early Buddhist texts. Familiarity with these early Buddhist texts is now much easier than it was. So actually, this is now a bit of a myth. Okay, we need to get past this. We need to stop looking for an original Buddhism or an oldest Buddhism, because the reality is that one doesn't exist. Now, this isn't to say that the Theravada isn't very old. It isn't to diminish the teachings. It isn't to diminish their way of doing things, the practice. But it's a pernicious myth to market this tradition as somehow privileged by age. Yes, it is the oldest surviving continual school of Buddhism, so far as we can tell. It absolutely is not the oldest form of Buddhism. There've been loads, and the picture of their emergence now has changed greatly. This is a 19th century position. This idea that the Theravada is this initial, oldest, original thing is a 19th century position. We need to move away from it, and the sooner we do that, the better.
And 2, Theravada is the closest teachings to the original Buddha.
Well, this is a claim that is certainly made, yeah. And there are some good reasons to think that some of the teachings go back, if not to the Buddha, then at least to his earliest followers. And I would say, actually, that the commonality between all Buddhist schools on the basic teachings suggests that there is a continuity that goes back to the Buddha somewhere. All right. The claim for me that the Theravada is the only school that gets closest to the Buddha's original teachings, that's a bit too strong. But, we'll let it fly.
That is not to say that Mahayana does not have amazing teachings themselves. Here's the main thing you got to remember. These schools teach the same thing in different ways. As Buddhism spread across the world, teachings needed to be understood in different ways for different people. Many enlightened masters along the way came and decided to change or reteach the teachings in their own way to be understood differently.
This is also true, largely. Another reason why things changed was because there are inconsistencies within the Pali Canon. There's a lot of contradictions. And especially when it comes to things like Abhidharma metaphysics, there was a lot of contradictions, and this is where the reform started, because educated people, educated Buddhists, came to realise that these contradictions were causing problems. So if you look at someone like Nagarjuna, for example, this is why he pushed back against the identity of Swabhava in Dharmas, because it caused a lot of conflict with the idea of dependent co-origination. Later on, it would cause problems with the idea of momentariness. So yeah, sure, a lot of it was to be understood. Much of it, and I mean a really great deal of it, was because of philosophical inconsistency.
Differently. The reason I study Theravada is because it is the oldest form and it is the closest to the teachings of the Buddha. Not to mention, I very much enjoy those teachings. I have spent time learning a bit about Mahayana teachings, and while valuable to me, they don't resonate. Mahayana Buddhism also is more close, in my opinion, to a religion, so to speak.
Or at least close to a really narrow, unusually odd understanding of religion that no serious scholar in the world studying this stuff shares.
Keep in mind, no Buddhist believes that there was a creator, or at least it's not even spoken about in the texts. Some of my followers did point out that there are suttas in the Pali Canon that speak about creator gods. However, like I said in my previous video, no Buddhist believes in a creator god. And in those suttas or stories of the Pali Canon, the Buddha himself tells those creator gods that they are not creator gods, further proving my point.
But there was two separate claims in the initial video, wasn't there? One was that Buddhists don't adhere to the belief in an omniscient, omnipotent creator god. True. The other claim was that they are so unconcerned with the idea of creator gods that they aren't even mentioned in Buddhist texts. This is categorically false, which I demonstrated in a previous video. Yes, Buddhists are concerned with creator gods. They are concerned with them to the point of disproving them. Why? Because it's a rejection of the broader Vedic orthodoxy prevalent in India at the time. So we need to get away from, this is what I'm getting at, we need to get away from this idea that the only conception of a god is the Abrahamic one. The Abrahamic conception of a god is a late conception, and even this wasn't settled in the early days of Christianity. And if you look up some of Dan McClellan's fantastic work on this, you'll see the arguments for this. All right. So yeah, there was two claims there. It doesn't really prove your point, because one of your points was Buddhist texts do not discuss created gods. They do.
Just felt like that was a bit nitpicky, to be honest.
One person's nitpicky is another person's accuracy, and it's important to be accurate on these sorts of points, on points of doctrine especially. If you are purporting to educate people on Buddhism, it behooves you to get the details right. And to quote Jack Reacher, details matter.
In an investigation, details matter.
But that's okay. I just want to make sure that you guys know that when I say these things, I'm not saying them with ignorance. I've studied for years, and I've spoken to many monks and many other Buddhists about these things.
Yeah, nobody's diminishing any of that. I think it's fab that someone's studying Buddhism in the wrong time, and I think it's great that someone's communicating Buddhism. I also think it's important to be accurate when you are communicating about Buddhism. It's important to be accurate when you are representing religion. It's important to be accurate, full stop. And I don't want to get into credentialism, but in this same video thread to which Bradley's referring, some of his followers came at me, well, what would you know? Well, I don't like credentialism, but to get things out there for people who haven't seen my introduction video but would like to know, I have a first-class bachelor's in philosophy, specialising in Indian philosophy. I have a distinction master's in philosophy, specialising in Indian philosophy, and then I have a PhD in philosophy, specialising in Indian philosophy, specifically early Indian Buddhism, and specifically Advaita Vedanta, specialising also in Sanskrit and Pali translation. Okay, I then went to Oxford and read for a PGC in religion, teaching it, alongside some world leaders such as Richard Gombrich and Gavin Flood. And I've taught at universities over the past 10 years, at all levels, except doctoral level, Indian philosophy and philosophy more broadly. So I've been doing this for a very long time, 20 years, and 12 years-ish of studying these stuff in their original languages. So some of the stuff, I'm not saying I'm always right, but some of the stuff I have to say is relevant, is valuable, and is more correct than other TikTok creators. It's not a competition, but it is right that we are accurate and we go with what the data says, not on vibes or not on common sense definitions or not what lots of people say, because there are experts in the world who know this stuff, and it's important that we reproduce this sort of thing accurately, fairly, and with as much of a fair eye as possible.
The main point here is that Buddhism itself has traveled across the world and has changed over time. But the original teachings are still here in these countries, and many people from these countries will agree with me.
Yeah, of course people of faith, of that specific school, are going to agree with you. The same way if I said Catholicism contained the oldest teachings of Christianity, the Catholics would agree. And if I said that Orthodoxy has the oldest teachings of Christianity, the Orthodox would agree. If I weighed in on the split between Sunni and Shia Islam, I'm sure I could get those to agree with me, depending which side of the fence I fall on. Having someone agree, even if it's a large amount of people agree on matters of fact and historicity, doesn't prove anything, I'm afraid. It's an appeal to popularity, which is an informal fallacy. So yeah, we can all get people to agree. That's what's, if we're being sort of cynical, we would say that's what sophism is about. But actually what we're about here is frank exchange of data and analysis of data. So yeah, it's really nice that you've had common ground with people, but it proves precisely nothing.
Buddhism is not really a religion. It's a science. It's a art form. It's a practice.
No, it certainly is a religion. Every major scholar on the planet agrees on this. And there's a reason for that. There's loads of reasons to categorise Buddhism as a religion. It's just that there's an agenda with this creator, which means he doesn't want to. He wants to get away from the Abrahamic thing. Oh, I'm not that religion. This isn't really a religion. It's much better. No, it's not. Buddhism has loads of hang-ups all of its own. We can see it all over the world, historically and currently. So, yeah, is it an art form? I don't think that's a helpful sort of analogy. Is it a science? No. It can supplement science in some ways, especially where meditation is concerned. But it's not a scientific account of the world, despite what the Abhidharma tried to do. And as for it being a practice, well, yeah, every religion's a practice. Literally every single one. So that's not some sort of knockout blow either. We need to get away from this idea that Buddhism isn't a religion. It's only pushed by one type of person, and that is Western converts. And it's then supported by indigenous people who want to ride the coattails of, well, it's Buddhist exceptionalism. That's what it is. Buddhist exceptionalism.
It's a practice of life, of how to be a human. It's one of the most fascinating things that you can learn, especially as a Westerner who's not resonating with modern day religion.
Absolutely agree. Fully agree. 100%. Yeah. I'll shout that from the rooftops too. I love it. I think more people should be interested in it. I think more people should be interested in religion, full stop. Because to understand religion is just to understand how the world ticks and to understand how people tick. It's to recognise a deep humanity, sometimes a deep inhumanity in all of us. And I think this is crucial.
You consider yourself agnostic or maybe even atheist, you might be interested in Buddhist practice. Because once you get through all of this technical stuff, there is a beautiful, beautiful practice beneath this that goes beyond words and beyond argument of is it a religion or not. In fact, I don't even really like to talk about it here on TikTok. It just seems to be that most people don't know that. What I prefer to talk about is the practice itself, about relieving ourselves from suffering, about giving ourselves that peace that we all really want. So if any of this is interesting to you and you want to learn more about how to find that peace, you know where to find me.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. Buddhism's great for these things. And the more people studying it, the more people interested in, for me, is a net good. Absolutely fantastic. So what we've seen in this video, there's still a lot of misperceptions here. I want to clear up, I don't have a problem with Bradley. Like, he seems like a nice guy. He's doing some really good stuff, talking about Buddhism, generally putting it out there to lay people. I think that's really crucial, really important. He's got a following, which is fantastic. My main gripe is we need to be accurate, and we need to get away from these misperceptions that we've talked about in this video. That is it. That is the sole complaint. We need to be accurate. We owe it to people to be accurate. We owe it to ourselves to be accurate and honest, especially about our own religious traditions. You have a duty to represent accurately, to criticise, to examine your own religious traditions. And I think actually sometimes that drops off in online TikTok creators talking about Buddhist thought. They don't have a full understanding, or they have gaps in their knowledge, and they fill it with stuff that isn't quite right. And it's important that we make it right, and that people understand the full extent, the full breadth, the full richness of Buddhist history, especially. Of any religious history, but for this instance, Buddhist history. A very rich tradition, lots of fantastic stuff. Get yourself familiar with it. You know, if you want to chat about it, then you can go over to Bradley's page, and you come over to mine. Awesome.